Hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth and final part of this series of videos based on the diorama that I've currently been building based on the Battle of Passchendaele 1917. As you may have seen in the last video that I made, towards the end I started talking about the Mark IV tank that I bought from Takom. Well, as from yesterday, I've just completed the build. This is it. As you can see, the first thing that probably notice is the strange bit of track that's been pushed up on the left hand side. Maybe looks a bit odd, but the reason for that, I wanted to try and recreate this picture. So obviously something similar to this would and did happen. The tank won't be submerged quite so much in the mud as this one is, but it'll be sunk down a little. The other thing that I tried to do, certainly by no means a competent kit builder as myself, but what I wanted to do to add a little bit more detail was to open up one of the side doors, and so obviously to allow for that, some of the inside had to be on display, whereas this kit and many of the others don't come with any interiors. So that had to be scratch built myself, using a few photos that I came across on the internet. There wasn't too many similar to these. I could scratch build and reconstruct something similar or along the same lines, and this is what I came up with. And I made this using the spare kit parts that I had from the kit, because the Mark IV is a hermaphrodite, which is half female, half male. I built the female version, as you can see here, but it still comes with the parts for the male side as well, which obviously is on the two sides here. So using those kit parts, I recreated the inside. The tank will be ditched something like that, so all the work and effort that I did put into it, like I mentioned, I wasn't too worried about recreating an exact copy, if not a copy at all, because if I do that, although the light's not very good, in better light you would be able to see a little bit inside, but not a lot. But just to show something that was there. So I was quite pleased with how that came out, and then obviously allowed the room, it comes up to about here in the inside, and then allow for the room for the rest of the model to click together. Apart from that, it was a really nice kit to build. I would recommend it. This is Takom's, as I mentioned. The kit itself, the tracks were just clicked together. Really simple, took minutes to put together. So come off. So the next part now is to prime it, and then I'll show you whereabouts it's going to fit onto the display. Okay, so the tank now has been primed with a grey, just normal grey spray paint from a local DIY shop. There are other primers you can buy specifically for models, but I find this is just as good for me. As you can see there, the open doors have been covered up, so the interior is protected, so obviously none of that grey paint will go inside. But overall it's come out pretty nicely. So now you can see roughly how it's going to fit onto the diorama. The idea was initially to do something like that, have it slightly sunken into the ground on the road above the meadow on the left. So under normal circumstances I would be pretty pleased at the angle of the tank. I think it looks quite dynamic on the model. The roads will still be higher yet, but the problem I do have now is these trees are the maximum height I can allow for the model to go under the table to fit into the display. That would be the height of the table, the maximum clearance, and at the moment it's about 2 inches too high. Even if I push down the tracks a little and glued them in place, it would still be too high. So the two options I've got would be to make this more of a sunken road, have a higher hedge and a higher wall running along, clear all this area here, and have it as a road, a sunken road, or to clear more of this area and still have the roads at a higher height, and make this more of a shell hole for the tank to have slipped into. Originally using this image gave me the idea, so I'll see which would be the best option. Okay, so this is where I am right now. I've made the hole bigger for the tank to fit into, so it sits a little deeper so I can go underneath the table now. And I've just started building a road using simply DIY plaster, and just mix some gravel, sand, the usual into the mix to create a bit of a terrain. Put some tank tracks through it as well, and some wheel marks. Put through little pieces of wood into it and some bricks. I've put Verlinden's skeletal soldier in there. I've given him his proper coat of paint, and put some shadows and highlights on him. But that will be finished off with oil washes and some pigments, so it blends into the roads and looks a bit dirtier later on. To create the barrier between the road and the meadow, what I've done is I've carved out some a stone wall, getting some ideas of one near my house. And to do that, I've simply just used some styrofoam, which is so thick. Cut it down to size so it creates. I didn't want anything too high. I mean, in an ideal situation, this wall probably would have been pummeled. There'll be hardly anything left during the battle, but I wanted to create a bit of separation between the two, so that's why I've left it slightly fragmented. And that's just simply carved out using various different tools to create this stone wall effect. It's all a learning process, so I'm quite pleased with how it's turned out for a first attempt, and it gives a bit more detail as opposed to just having nothing there at all. So the Mark IV has been given its initial coat now of the green paint. I used green moss from MIG's range, a couple of base coats of the basic colour, and then mixed a lighter colour in to do the centre of the panels and the top part of the tank to give it some highlights, and then again mixed it with a black, a little bit of black, and did the middle of the rivets and the lower part of the hull. The tracks themselves were just done with a mixture of a couple of types of brown and some black. And now I've got some enamel washers again from MIG, dark brown wash for green vehicles, and the tracks wash. So once this has been chipped up using some dark grey paint, I can then use the washers to give it some nice effects. And the Mark IV will sit in something like that. Somewhere around there. Sits quite deep into the mud. This side will all be quite hidden, but that side will be going into this corner of underneath the table, so it won't really be visible anyway. So that's not too much of a problem. But that's roughly how it's going to sit. So my next task now is to put a load of plaster into this hole, and then I'm thinking of covering it with cling film, and then sitting the tank on top to get a good mould, so it sits neatly into the mud. And then once that's dry, I can paint all the road, give it all a one colour, and then start working on the highlights and the terrain of the road area. And then once the tank is finished and sits in its place, I can then fill in around the edges if there's any, with some more plaster, some mud, and some water as well, so it all sits in place. final model complete. It's taken a few months to put together, a little bit longer than I anticipated that it might have done. But once you start adding some little bit of detail, more detail than what I expected to. This was the original photo that I had in video part 1, just with the barren landscape, not much going on, just the broken trees, the duckboards going down with the figures obviously on, running through the water. But once you do a little bit of historical backgrounds and look at some images online, you get a few more ideas, get a few more details, and you add a bit more, then a bit more. This also obviously was what I used in the part 1 of the videos, and the original idea to have the tank in the top left corner, the duckboards running through the middle with the figures on, the shell holes in the first aid post, the front post rather, and also to include the small footbridge. So as it turned out, I'm pretty pleased with how it's all finished off. Obviously for this fourth and final part, I've added the tank into the muddy road, added a few the puddles into that, made the wall out of the foam and touched that up a little bit, added the signpost, and then the 4 figures walking down the duckboards, the British guy behind and the 3 German prisoners, obviously one being injured, just to complete it, and finished off the resin, topped up a few of the shell holes just to finish off that resin, and that's it, all pretty much complete. As always, thanks for watching. Any likes and comments always appreciated, and of course any people subscribing, and then on to the next project. Thanks for watching.
Is a funny little codger with a smile, a funny smile. 5 feet none, he's an awful little dodger with a smile, a funny smile. The short road, he'll have his little show, he can't be so pressed. All the other fellas have to grin when he gets this off his chest. Hey! Pack all your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile. While you've a Lucifer to light your fag, smile, boys, that's the smile. What are you for worrying? It never was worthwhile. Oh, pack all your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile. Pack all your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile. While you will look to light your bag, smile, boys, that's the time. What do you stop worrying? It never was worthwhile. Oh, pack all your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile. Up to mighty London came an Irishman one day. As the streets are paved with gold, sure everyone was gay, singing songs of Piccadilly, Strand and Leicester Square, till Paddy got excited, then he shouted to them there. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly, farewell, Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there.